It's time to look into the future. Today on Garden Time, we talk about gardening trends. Who decides what's hot and what's not, and what does that mean to the gardener? Plus, we talk about a couple of plants to look out for in the next year or so. Coming up next on Garden Time. Garden Time is brought to you by Capital Subaru in Salem, Oregon.
Start your new Subaru story at Capital Subaru. We are like nothing else. From the moment you step through these doors, you see it, you feel it. We do things differently here. Our people, our culture, our customer experience. Tell us what you're looking for and we'll upgrade the way you shop for Subarus. When you're just browsing, need great service, or starting your next adventure, we're always here for you. It's your story at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.
Welcome to the Garden Time Podcast. We're based in the Pacific Northwest of the United States in a Zone 7 region. This deals with plants that can survive at approximately 0 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer. I'm producer Jeff Gustin with your hosts Judy Alaruzo and Ryan Seeley. Welcome to Garden Time. I'm Jeff. This is Ryan and Judy. And thank you again to Capital Subaru in Salem, Oregon for sponsoring our podcast and video. Today we're going to talk about trends. And first of all, my question is, trends, how did these start in the garden centers? When did they start? Are they important?
That's such a big question. It really is. We were talking just before we started the film, and it's like, you know, we all want to be on the cutting edge as people in the business. Me as a retailer and a podcaster, you know, we want to tell you the coolest new things, but we also want to have it in our garden. So it's kind of funny that there's somebody out there thinking about what's going to be trending in the next year.
And it's funny because a lot of these trends are coming about. They're not new
right.
by any means. I mean, they're talking about white gardens. I mean, planting white flowers in your garden and having this evening garden, that's been around a long time.
Right.
Might have a little different twist on it, but it's, you know, it's not necessarily new, but it's maybe for a newer generation that's coming up through, or a newer gardener that hasn't been through that before.
And they rename it. So now it's the moon garden, it's the twilight garden. Right. So they just put a different spin so it sounds fresh again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, you know, in the garden centers, you know, they, you know, some look at trends and you want to be on top of this, and then others maybe don't. But it kind of, maybe it's a roadmap as to something to look at, or give you ideas of what to go after.
Right, and because we want people to be excited. So it's like, does the new Mazda look like the old Mazda? Or, you know, I mean, they just tweak it a little bit, but you still have to have a new car every year. So you have to have new trends every year.
Right. So is this more of a marketing thing from the garden center and from, you know, the retailer and the wholesaler point of view?
No, I think there is, you know, some marketing that it's, you know, because we've talked about, you know, how does a trend get started, or who is setting these trends, right? There's not a big trend authority out there that's you know, forecasting out for 10 years out of what these trends are.
Right.
It's, you know, you may get, you know, growers or breeders that are, you know, breeding new genetics of something. Okay, we're starting to see a trend in a more compact plant, or a tropical plant that's starting to get hardier that survives in different areas. So maybe that's going to be a trend that you start seeing some of this, and it's coming from the plant side of things.
That's true, yeah, because I've seen that, because that all makes sense, because our houses are small, you know, our yards are smaller, the houses are bigger, the land is smaller. Right. So the compact plants, and container gardening is so important. So yeah, that's been a trend that's, now it's not even a trend anymore, right. It's a stable.
And if you look at the trends for like a gardening trend, you know, like you said, it's coming off of, okay, what are houses doing? You know, what are these builders and architects, and what are they designing with a limited space that pretty soon now you have to have a plant palette that, you know, fits into what you're living in, or, you know, Pantone colors, right? You know, different colors.
Hold that thought. We're going to get to Pantone.
You know, but different colors, or different, you know, architectural styles, or, you know, they start playing into it, where pretty soon you start seeing these, and you need something to fill the void or to decorate around that.
Right.
So you mentioned about groups, and is there really a trend authority? And there's a couple of groups out there, and we're very familiar with them. Garden Media Group is one. It's a company, and they do marketing, but they also do consulting, and they do track trends. So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll go to other countries and see what's coming over from Europe or what's coming from Japan. just a quick story. My wife Teresa and I, we went to Australia, and we were there in January. Australia Day, like our 4th of July, they send out media people to all these small villages to act as a liaison for the government. And we got to meet Jane Edmondson, and she hosts garden shows down there. And we're like going, we're down there, it's winter here, it's summer there. What are the trends? Tell us what the trends are. She goes, well, it's container gardening, it's gardening with kids. It was the same thing that we get. And she said, we're just 6 months out of what you guys do. So similar to what we do and go to pick off in different markets, they do down there as well, south of the equator. So Garden Media Group has gone through, Ryan, you pulled up, I think, the list, and I have some of them written here, about some of the trends that they see. And Katie, who's DeBow, is one of the principals of the company, she gave a presentation this summer at Cultivate, which is a trade show. So Ryan, you were at Cultivate.
Yeah, I was at Cultivate, and I think it's good, mentioning that, these trade shows, because you do start seeing similarities, where I think you'll start seeing trends if, like colors in plants, where if you start seeing lots of breeders that are breeding plants in certain colors, you start seeing some similarities throughout these shows. And then you go to these shows across, the United States, or like you said, Jeff, into Europe regions. So I think those are where you start seeing some of these trends that just automatically develop on their own. And it's maybe not people that are collaborating to set the trend ahead of time, but it's like it starts playing out. It's like, gee, I'm really starting to see a lot of kids gardening things, or people promoting that. Well, maybe that's the trend, and that's kind of how those things kind of
right. It filters through all the different levels,
But so the Garden Media Group was talking about some, as far as we were talking about housing, and it's we're coming off of COVID and pandemics and kind of the big great reset of people. They've kind of spent the last 2 or 3 years kind of evaluating their life, their priorities, what they're doing, and they've had a lot of changes, right? They were home for a long time, not sure what to do. There's job changes, and now you're starting to see, okay, we've got a clearer idea of what it is important to yourself. And so people are out now. The housing market is still very hot and strong. You start getting, the younger generation now is finally getting into purchasing homes. They've been sitting stagnant for kind of a long time. I think that generation, it's the latest generation that has held on the longest without purchasing homes. And now they're realizing, okay, we're getting older, we want to start families, we're getting homes. So now what does that mean for trends? They're home, they're starting to look at their yards, they're just getting into gardening. They've seen their parents or their grandparents that have done it, and they finally have their own place. But their own place may be a little bit smaller and doesn't have the big vast yards. So people are looking at, okay, how do I get creative with the spaces that I have, and what can I do with it? It's just not, it's not a half acre, just open flat area that I could go put lawn in the middle and then line it with shrubs around the outside. We have these creative, patio areas and deck areas, and we're going vertical. Because we don't have a lot of space, so they're getting very creative. So it's interesting to look at some of these trends where that's kind of, it's creating different spaces for the space that you have and utilizing every space that you do.
Right.
Well, and Judy, you had mentioned the plant selections for those smaller gardens.
Right, and so that's one of the ones I think that it finally got to breeders, because breeders, it takes a long time to breed a plant. So they finally caught on, and so I think that it's almost like they're going too small. It's like, really, do I want a plant that's only a foot where the natural one is 2 feet? It's kind of awkward that way. But what I did like about that one article that I read was about living walls. And I think we've been through living walls. It was a trend a couple years ago. And it's really difficult. I mean, they're very high maintenance. But now they're talking about living walls, meaning vertical, like you were saying. Right. Like, why not have a climbing rose or have a vine on your fence or on your wall? And it's a living wall. Or even having shrubs that you're shearing to make it a mass of green or whatever. And so it's still a living wall, but much easier to take care of, much less maintenance.
Well, and we were talking about a couple of years ago, they had those hedges that you could just buy.
Yeah.
And it was already grew in a hedge. And I think this goes to that new homeowner thing about simplistic design and less maintenance because you're starting families, you got a new home, maybe funds are a little tight. Do you see that in the garden center when you come to, is there a price point that scares people away? Or are you pricing plants differently, or are you choosing plants differently based on that?
Yeah, I think you always have to have that good, better, best. We were talking about that as retailers, wholesalers, that you have to have price range because you have different customers who have different budgets. So there's the people that maybe they're buying the smaller plant, and some people want the bigger one. It depends if you want it now or you don't mind waiting a couple of years. So it's always nice to have that kind of range for people, and we try to address that so that you really accommodate all your customers.
Well, we talked about the papyrus that was recently come out in the last couple of years. You had King Tut, you had Baby Tut, and I think you had Prince Tut or something in there, and so you have and Queen Tut I think is coming out on the market here shortly. So, but they're all various sizes based on their names, so you can buy the one that fits best in your garden. So, Ryan, is there a
So it's also with this age we're looking online. Everything is there's your social medias really start playing factors in this. So your Pinterest have been big. People posting on their boards on that. TikTok videos.
Yes.
And your all your other socials where you're seeing ideas.
and people are bragging.
Oh yeah,
Right.
that's fun to watch that.
Right.
Yeah.
They're proud of what they're doing. They're posting snippets, and it builds this excitement where people are starting to see, a trend maybe going on there. Something might go viral that somebody did this project, and then somebody else is kind of duplicating it, and then they post it.
Right.
And so then you start seeing these, and they may be quick trends. We've
Right.
seen it with houseplants.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Trends,
yeah.
which is usually trends in the past have taken years or two to kind of build up and ramp down, but in the houseplant market, these trends are going fast.
Oh yeah.
This plant is you've never heard of it. It's the hottest thing. Everybody wants it. They're paying tons of money for it if they can find it. Then pretty soon, every grower is scrambling to try to get it, and just when they get to market with it, nope, we're done with that. We're moving on to
Right.
something
Yeah.
else. And
Pink princess.
Right.
Pink princess.
That market now, okay, that's now a
Yeah.
$2 plant
Yeah,
instead of a
yeah.
$2,000 plant.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You brought up the whole thing about designs, and people are taking designs and then improving them. It's almost like you almost want to see who wore it best as far as garden design.
Right.
Have everybody pick the same thing and then, or the same
Right.
layout, and then build something. I also noticed something too about people are going more sustainable. So that's getting rid of the gas-powered tools, going to electric.
Yes.
Ergonomic tools as you age, that kind of thing. Have you guys noticed that in the markets?
I think that you have to have that. I think that some people, it's a price point thing, or mom gave me this for Christmas, I have to use it, that kind of thing. But if they have their druthers, they're going to go electric because they're really, and they're easy to use, they're lightweight. If you have to go out, you really want to check out the electrics.
I made the switch this year and went all battery for battery, backpack blower, battery lawnmower, and I'm slowly, phasing in and getting rid of hedge clippers and all of that over time, and I just keep adding to it. But it's you look at gas prices were not cheap.
No,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah. So you start
Sure.
go fill your 5-gallon little gas can, and it's like pretty soon it's $25-$30. We're like, wow, that's not.
You're thinking, yeah.
But
You
the
start thinking.
tools aren't cheap either. Was this a concern when you were buying?
It was. I was looking at. I was the point where I was needing to replace anyway because I got the useful life out of my lawnmower, and it just made sense for me to go there. So I'm like, well, I can have an interchangeable battery that I could recharge and power all of my different things, and then the technology's gotten better.
Very much.
So it's instead of having a battery that's going to last about 2 seconds and then you go charge it and wait for 3 hours until it's charged again.
Not
I can go mow my lawn, I can go blow off my yard, all in one battery.
Wow.
And then I have a second battery that if I back up if I need to do extra. But
Extra
the
energy.
technology is changing and they're getting better. And
So that's more of a trend that's long term. It's
Right.
not this is not one of those annual things.
Right.
People are now making this conversion.
And you're starting to see municipalities that are starting to ban gas powered.
I hadn't heard
It's
that.
noise,
Yeah, noise.
and pollution.
Oh wow.
And so there's many big cities. I think LA is getting to that point, and some of the California. I think even up here in Oregon that are, they have a deadline where they're going to start banning, and you cannot use a gas powered after a certain
Interesting.
date. So that's kind of that phase in of that. So
Yeah, kind of smart. But even to the point of looking at sustainability, planting natives in your garden for pollinators, and I think the idea of planting for pollinators is beyond a trend now. I think people are really thinking about it. They're thinking about the wildlife that they want to invite. I mean, you don't want to invite the deer in, but you don't mind butterflies and bees. So I think people are thinking of that, and that started as a trend. I mean, we started hearing about it probably more than 5 years ago.
Yeah, so that brings up kind of an interesting, so a trend is now becoming just mainstay.
Yeah.
A
Is it
lifestyle.
a lifestyle?
A lifestyle.
Is that typical? You know, a lot of times you see trends that kind of that come and go
True.
and fizzle out. But to your point, you know, you get some trends that
That's
becomes
true.
the new norm.
Right, that is true. Because one of the trends I thought it was kind of funny was kitchen gardens. And it's like, what is the difference between a kitchen garden and a vegetable garden? The size, the proximity. It was just
Yeah.
kind of funny. It's like, you know, everybody loves to have a tomato plant, but is it a kitchen garden or?
Well, I always love the herb pot. So you plant an
Yeah.
herb pot and you put it next to your, back door, sliding glass door, and a year later, 2 years later, one's died out and one's just overgrown. The rosemary's taken over,
Right.
and then it's
Still
like
got rosemary, everything else is done. but-
everything else is gone. So it's not an herb garden anymore. It's just a rosemary pot.
But I think you know, like you said, planting herbs in a pot is not anything new. But you'll see, maybe marketing behind it, or the way you're addressing, or the consumer that you're going after to show them more ideas of what you can do with this. And I think a lot of these trends can be more of a marketing from the marketing side of just educational.
Yes, yes.
Because you go into a garden center, if you don't necessarily see them all planted together in a big pot, you might not think, if you're a new gardener, oh, I can plant those all together? Well, that is a good idea, that I can put my rosemary and my basil and have my pizza planter or my mojito garden or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So it's giving them ideas, and it's educating a new gardener.
Right, for sure. And I think that's what after COVID, I think that it's on us as a retailer or wholesaler to educate, because there's so many new gardeners. Was it 180 million people across the United States started to garden that never had gardened before? And so I think that the onus is on us now to keep these people educated, and so that they keep on wanting to garden.
Is there burnout? I mean, are these trends trying to prevent burnout by keeping people excited because there's new stuff happening? Is there burnout?
You have time. I think your enemy is time and budget, and so you can go water skiing, or you can go hiking, or you can stay home and garden. So how do you get those people to stay home and garden and not go water skiing or hiking?
But I think you can balance it. I don't
Yes.
think you have to choose. It's how it's incorporating whatever you're doing into a lifestyle that works for you. There's some I stay home now more than I ever used to. Now that I work from my home, where I used to go into an office, so it was I'd come home after work and it's like, okay, I gotta go back out in the yard after I've been doing it elsewhere all day. So it's my lifestyle has changed and adapted, and it's always been gardening, but I have a little bit more extra time now that I can go out on lunch and go putter in my yard if I want to.
Right.
And so it's I think you look at these as everybody is evolving. Their homes are changing, their yards are changing. It's not a plant it once and just forget your yard, and it's going to be the same in 10 years. It's like I was looking at my yard the other night. I had a bunch of family over, and kind of surveying, showing off my yard, and I think I've been in my house for a little over almost 25 years, and I think I have maybe one plant that's an original plant in my yard. I'm like, that's new. That Japanese maple's about it.
Okay, in your defense, you used to work for a grower, so you would see a cool plant,
Right,
you'd bring it
and I
home.
would bring it home, and I'm notorious. I think I've said this in the past. I like to rearrange the furniture in my yard, dig plants up and move them around. It gets too big, and I just get rid of it and put something else. But our yards are evolving.
Right.
Our lifestyles are evolving.
So we're talking about that, about you bringing new plants home, and you noticed this in retail during COVID, online. So that became kind of a trend, is people buying online. And I'd like to talk a little bit, we just got a few minutes here before the break, about, do people buy more online? Do you offer, you can't offer as much as you can if they come into the store. What is online meant for the wholesaler and for the retailer?
So a retailer for online, so right now we can only offer so much per every department. And so we try to have the best of the season, and we're really working on that, but it's a lot of time and energy. So I think that we're still working through that. I think that online for a retailer brick and mortar, it's more of your showcase. You're showing people what you have, and like then they have the option to come. We don't ship, so they have the option to order online and come and pick it up, and that's a time saver. People are busy. Or they can see what you have online. It's like, I want to actually see it. I want to touch it. I want to smell it. And they come into the store, which I think that's a better tool. I'm not an online shopper, but I think that's that kind of hybrid use of an e-commerce for a brick and mortar.
Right. And I, coming from the wholesale background and, being with the wholesaler that did put together an online presence and sold, so it was, they would wholesale out to garden centers, and supply garden centers throughout the Northwest and across the country with plant material. But they made the conscious effort is like, we want to get into this because there's so many other people that were not being reached by that plant. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't necessary to displace the garden center that was there, but it was to supplement it and be able to broaden out and be able to supply basically the nation of anybody who wanted to get on and ship the entire lineup.
Well, you guys used to, this is your former employer, you used to have a program where people could order plants, designate a garden center, and a portion of that purchase price went to support that garden center.
Right.
During COVID, when they couldn't go to the garden center.
Right, when they weren't ordered, we would ship them to the customer and give credit, a little kickback to that garden center that would do the referral. Now the garden centers are all open, but it's still they want to partner, and it's basically providing plants for everybody that's out there.
Right.
And
That was a
and
great
that's
service.
what I think the online has done is opened up the accessibility to plants. So I think you see a lot more growers that are getting into shipping plants, because they can. They're figuring out how to get there. They can ship trees.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen videos of six, seven tree that comes out of a box. I'm like, wow.
Congratulations.
I'm glad I'm not the FedEx guy delivering that one.
Now, having said that, we totally support local independent garden centers because when you go, you're going to get the plant that's growing right for your area. You're going to get expert advice, and you'll be able to get all those tools and supplies and stuff, and you don't have to get multiple orders from different vendors. You can just go once, drop your credit card one time, and walk home and start planting. Right. So, yeah. So we're going to take a break and listen from Capital Subaru, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what all these trends mean for you, the gardener. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Start your new Subaru story at Capital Subaru. We are like nothing else. From the moment you step through these doors, you see it, you feel it. We do things differently here. Our people, our culture, our customer experience. Tell us what you're looking for, and we'll upgrade the way you shop for Subarus. When you're just browsing, need great service, or starting your next adventure, we're always here for you. It's your story at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.
And welcome back to Garden Time. We're talking about trends today, and we talked about some of the trends a little bit about sustainability and smaller gardens and all that. Now we're going to talk about specific for the home gardener. And assistant producer Therese brought up, we need to talk about plants. And first of all, we talk about plants because of the nature of the plants and their introduction to the market. A lot of times we don't hear about them until like December or January, but some have come out earlier, right?
Yeah, well, the trade shows that we all go to as part of this industry, those are all happening, so we get to see sneak peeks. So you were out at Cultivate and you saw some cool ones, and there's another one coming up far west, which is in Portland, and people come from all over the country and the world to come to this show to kind of see what people are bringing to the show to show off.
And I've been, like I said, I've been going around this year and doing the trade shows, but also trial gardens. And so the trial gardens are where the breeders, the ones that are coming up with all the new plants, are going to the growers, various different growers throughout the United States, and they said, hey, we have these new plants. will you plant them in your gardens and trial them out to see how they grow? Because none of these breeders want to go just take a plant and just go flood the market with it without seeing how it performs. So there's thousands and thousands of plants that are grown every year.
And they're not named. They have like
Right.
codes
Yeah, they have
or
numbers, yeah.
There's Petunia GYQ96C or something, right? I mean, it's just, but they want to see how they perform. So I think that's good to point that out, that when you see plants that are coming out on the market, it's not the first time it's ever been seen. It's actually been growing for a few years, and they're doing their due diligence to see how they perform because they want the gardener to be successful with
sure.
it. So so I've seen some of these peaks that will open these trial gardens in the last year, and dropping them down the south and the north and places like that, and seeing what they've done. So you're going to start seeing plants now. They're going to start trickling into the industry. People are going to get this little sneak peek, maybe limited selections, and so you'll start seeing them. And then once it starts building up, then 2-3 years down the road, then you'll really start to see that, and that's where you'll start seeing the trends and the colors and things like that. So that's just to give a little background of what's coming down the pipeline.
Definitely,
is you will see some of these. And so I saw that last year, the cutting edge of it, and then a year or two later, you may see it in bigger scale.
Yeah.
But we were just talking too, is that out of those hundreds and hundreds and thousands of plants, they bring the best of the best to these trade shows. So a lot of them, like you said, Red Lark, which is a Delphinium, is appearing at Cultivate this year because they have numbers large enough for the retailer to sell.
Right, and that's so true because it takes a long time. You have to get cuttings, you have to get seed, whatever, to put it in production, big production. And a local grower had this Red Lark, and Ryan, you had it, right?
Yeah, I planted it in my yard last year, and for those that don't know, so it's a Delphinium Red Lark. So Delphiniums have typically been in the whites, purple, and pink kind of shades.
Blues, right.
And this one is truly kind of a salmon red, coral red.
It's beautiful.
It looks beautiful,
It's stunning.
yeah.
I saw it. I'm not a big Delphinium. I like Delphiniums. I saw it, and I had to have one for my yard.
Right.
It's
So
just
different.
it's that different to look. And so got a sneak peek of it last year, and then this year I started seeing it all the shows. And I would for next year in the spring of 23, I bet you will start seeing it in the garden centers.
I have told my grower every time I see a list, it's like, you must get Delphinium Red Lark. And now I'm seeing it on this, I'm going to tell him he must have it now.
Yeah, mine did come back.
And it came back.
It did come back this year.
Because many years ago there was one, I can't think of the name of it, but it was very similar, but it was an annual. It did not come back, at least for the Northwest, it did not come back. But it's so stunning because it's a color breakthrough. And whenever there's a color breakthrough, I mean, that's a star. I mean, that's something that you're so proud of to have and, have for your customers.
Right, and how many years did we chase the elusive, true black plant, or blue?
Right.
That color just doesn't really exist. But,
no.
to get some of these colors, you really start seeing the breakthroughs.
Right.
And you'll see some, how many different shades of petunias?
Yeah, so Judy, as a buyer, you have Calibrachoas, Million Bells, and every year there are dozens and dozens of new introductions. How do you, as a buyer, pick the right ones for your garden centers?
So you have to really buy for all these customers. I mean, you have this whole demographics, and so you have to, and then you get the basics. You have to have white, you have to have pink, you have to have blah, blah, blah. You have to have the doubles, and then you have to have the novelties like Cherry Star, where it's that red, cherry red with the yellow in it.
The dark throats.
Oh my gosh, and those are just stunning. But maybe you don't get as many of those because that's the special one. Everybody wants the meat and potato kind of ones because they know them. And so you really have to buy all of those.
So is there a value in a trendy plant?
Oh, definitely. Because you have those people that want that. I have to be the first one on my block to have that Delphinium. If
you're truly looking for something new, and then you'll also start seeing them come up on your social media. You'll start seeing in magazine articles written about them, featuring look at this new color or this new trend, and then that's where you'll start seeing in the perfect world you'll have the media people working together with the plant people.
Right.
So when the plant is available, then you start promoting it.
Right.
Where it just seems like a lot of times it's kind of backwards, where they'll promote a plant nowhere to be found for a couple years.
Yeah, that's the disappointing.
Right.
Yeah, and then you don't want that to happen.
And you mentioned disappointment-wise is the naming. And you said, and we all kind of agree, every once in a while we just want to slap some of the growers around or marketing people or whatever, because you can grow a plant and call it Mrs. Smith's rose, and it could look like Mr. Lincoln.
Right.
But everybody comes in, they want Mrs. Smith, and it's like, this is the same rose. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. They just named it so that they could carry a series within the same name, kind of cute.
Exactly.
And so you run into that all the time.
Oh.
You grow plants that are identical sometimes to the name series, and sometimes they're cheaper.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you just have to watch, because you want to make sure that you're buying the right one, you have the right name, and that it kind of meets all that criteria. But it just gets more complicated, and you don't want to even have that to the consumer, because they don't care. They just think it's pretty and it's going to grow in my yard.
Well, and we were talking about the names get so long, you can't even put them on the tags.
Right.
It's like, the sun something 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 something.
And it's 12
Delphinium.
words.
And it's like the 12th word is Delphinium. So when we were talking about the plants, let's talk about some of them that were here to cultivate. And so Red Lark was one of them. And then you had mentioned sedum that had popped up.
Oh, that variegated one.
Right, there's a great new
Sparkler.
variegated called Little Shimmer.
Little Shimmer, yep.
And so very tight, compact. It's kind of like a green and white, very mounding, very tight. Just looks different than a lot of the other sedums out there. So it's one that can take a fair amount of sun or take us a little bit of shade. And so people that are looking for, it's just a nice pop of color. That just pure white, variegation gives it a very nice look to it.
Right, and talk about trends. Sedums and sempervivums, hens and chicks, have been such a cool plant for all of our gardens the last few years. And a lot of them are just green or burgundy, and to have a variegated one, it just adds to that mix, so it's a nice one.
And speaking of sempervirens, we're starting to see more of the super scents.
Yeah, they're huge.
Right, and so I think, Judy, you've said you've started carrying these at the garden center. What's different about them?
They're huge. They are huge. And I think before there were some that were big, but now the breeders are going. We did a story on Garden Time with Kevin Vaughn, who's a local breeder, and he's breeding them. They were 10 inches across.
Dinner plate. Yeah.
They were just amazing.
Right.
And so those are so fun. I mean, and that's something really new to the market. And I think this coming year, it's going to be everywhere.
Right.
And he was talking about, for him, trend-wise, he's looking for new stuff he crossbreeds and does the hand cross-pollination and that kind of stuff, and then plants the seeds. And a lot of these trend plants, like you said, take years to get to market. So he's working on stuff that probably won't even be seen for years to go. We also talked about Calibrachoas, and so there's a new one out from Suntory that also appear to cultivate.
Yeah.
And this kind of gets into, it's like, now with Calibrachoas, you're looking at colors. You're not looking at different plants structured necessarily. You're looking for unique colors, like the elusive black or the elusive blue, that kind of thing. So are you seeing people coming in and grabbing these whenever there's a new color?
Oh, of course. And this new one, it's the Orangina, and it's like, I think orange has been really hard, and they're still working on an orange petunia. It's like they haven't gotten there yet, but you can get it in a Calibrachoa, even though people think it's a petunia, just a little one. But I think people, and if you're an annual person, every year you put the same things in, so I think you're like looking for something different. So you have to offer that, And I was so excited to see on these new trend things, they renamed the baby boomers. So I'm a baby boomer, I'm old, and it's like, instead of calling us seniors or veterans, we're now the super agers.
The super agers.
And so
That's a trend.
That's right.
Because
Better
we're
than the
active.
supersizers.
We shouldn't be. But it's like, because the seniors now are different from the seniors 20 years ago. We're much more active. We're still working. We're still, we're still mountain climbing or whatever. We're still being very active, being active gardeners. So it's kind of fun that we're still marketing to them, to us.
So we talk about colors. We were talking about Pantone. So every year Pantone, which is a group of design experts, get together and they pick their color of the year. And this has been kind of adopted by garden centers and the garden industry. And this year it is what?
Digital lavender.
Digital lavender.
I know.
And so it's like, okay, but this is not meant for plant colors necessarily, correct?
I think so, because we just told you, breeders take 5-7 years sometimes to get plants to market. But it's all the other stuff. It's your pillows on your patio furniture. It's your containers. It's the pretty vase that you have on your table outside on your deck. So yeah, you want to kind of coordinate your plants to look good with that.
Yeah, the ribbons, and and that's getting back to some of those trends that we've seen over the years is that the inside, outside, and that's still a pretty popular trend is bringing your inside, outside, and kind of blurring that line between your living space and your outdoor space. It's creating that outdoor space. That's not super new, but it's still a trend that's happening. There's especially as we're getting back to entertaining and having people over and being able to be indoors and opening up our house and having that our yard as an extension. So when you get into some of these Pantone colors, where you do have those accents throughout your house, it might be on your pillows or your dish towels or your linens or your dishes or whatever it is, and it's continuing that out to your outdoor patio furniture, and then you're always going to be able to find a plant that's going to complement
There's
that.
lavender color plants.
Right.
But we also talked about, so Garden Media Group had said that the color for garden centers this year is terracotta. And so we had this discussion during the break about, the differences between the color of the year between these two. And it's and I think it comes down to it's what you as a person prefers in your house and garden. So you're not going to go out and change over all your patio furniture unless you won the Powerball or Mega Millions. You're not going to change that out every year for the color of the year. You're going to pick a color that's good for you, whether it's terracotta or
or digital lavender.
Digital lavender, thank you. So for people that are looking for that, what is your recommendation? I mean, do they hitch their wagon to that Pantone's train, or do they do something different?
Well, I think I was talking to our visual manager at Al's, and I asked her, I was like, do you kind of coordinate the plants with your colors? Because she has a color palette every season to kind of do the backdrops. And she said, I can't. She goes, because that's really difficult. But she said, usually we have something that'll go with it. She has this color palette. She goes, next year, of course, you're going to have lavender plants. And so I can always pull those into the display. But she said, I don't go to our grower, and say, you must have lavender plants.
Right.
But there's such a big color range in plants. I thought it was funny one year Pantone color was green. It's like, oh, that's an easy one.
Well, like Ryan says, you can always find something.
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And it's also a way you'll see a lot of the independent garden centers, when they're doing their visual merchandising and laying out displays, they'll color block
Yes.
different areas. So all of your kind of orange flowering plants are all together, or all of your lavender or your purple color, maybe to match their Pantone color, are all in one area, so people can visually see if they are trying to coordinate plantings in a planter. You'll have some big leafy, like a calibrachoa, if you get into like the Royal Hawaiian series, with you have your dark burgundy foliage or some with their veins, and then it's complemented with the purple coloring of the flowers. And so it's showing that. And so I think it's by having these colors, it's more of kind of giving ideas to the garden center that can put together displays to give the consumer a visual look about, oh, this, I can duplicate this and take it home, or I already have part of this at home already, which I don't want to not use, but I can accent and complement it with these other items.
So if you're a fan of digital or lavender,
Right.
this is your year. I
Yes,
mean,
there you go.
I've been waiting for years.
2023. You could have that lavender.
But we were also talking about the trends. You mentioned it earlier in the first half, Ryan, about indoor plants and how they become hot. We talked about Pink Princess, which was introduced. People were buying it for like hundreds of dollars for a little 4-inch plant, and now it seems to be readily available. Still a little on the spendy side because it is hard to propagate and reproduce. But then at Cultivate, we had one here that looked like my hostas in the spring after the slugs hit. But this is a very unique
It's cool.
monstera. And so just some thoughts about the indoor plant market and trends. Is it fading?
Well, yeah. So so what I've seen, there's a lot of we've gotten into the monsteras and the variegated white, your high constellation, and ones with all your fenestrations and your holes, and you're starting to see some different coloring coming out in leaf, because a lot of your houseplant has all been foliage, and so it's all green or pink or white or various variegations of that. But you're starting to see in some of the like the Calibrachoas, some metallic silvers and metallic reds and blues that are a little bit different. And then I also think you're going to start seeing more flowering houseplants. So like behind us here, is bring this forward, which is just stunning. Is kind of a good example of what you're saying.
And for those that can't see
what's going on. So this is an African violet. African violets obviously have been around forever. Grandma had African violets.
Great-grandma.
Great-grandma had African
Great-great-grandma.
violet. But they've green leaf, purple flower, typically.
And a dead leaf in the front.
Yeah, that's
you have to get rid of that.
But this one is spectacular.
Right, and I think Jeff, we were out one day. We were shooting and. Pick this one up at the Seabright Garden.
That's the bad part about doing a garden show is that we go to these places where we end up with plants in the back of the car. So.
But this African violet here, and we've done stories with African violet breeders, stunning white variegation to the foliage, and then the blooms are a lot different. So
and they're so big.
Large blooms, so you're getting them in more of the lavender colors here. You're getting bicolor blooms.
Ruffled edges.
So there's.
And so this is generally a trend in indoor plants.
I think you're going to start seeing more. I know Streptocarpus.
I was just going to say we've seen the breakthroughs in those.
Right. So Streptocarpus is another one that have been around a long time. But you're starting to see the new breeding coming out in these where you're getting into the ruffled leaves or the ruffled powers, bicolor tones, big blooms, little blooms. So I think you're going to start seeing a lot more in that coming down in years to come. More things that people can have indoor their house that it will be blooming. And so you'll have your staple and your foliage plants, but then indoor blooming will be coming on.
And you could see that because I think people are, everybody collects now. The houseplant people are the mainstay.
Right.
They're really collectors, and so they've gotten everything that they can. So now what's the next one? Oh, maybe I need a collection of African violets or Streptocarpus or bromeliads or something. So I think that's kind of fun because they'll be looking for something else because it's like they'll get bored.
But because the indoor plants have been a trend for now a few years, is the market flooding? Is there too much of the cool plants out there? And is it kind of diversifying and spreading the dollars too thin?
It's not the cool plants, it's the basic plants. Because the cool plants will always be expensive.
Right.
Because you just can't get them.
Right. But then once they figure out and people are getting on the board bandwagon of growing them, and you start seeing more plant swaps.
Yes, plant swaps.
And people sharing plants, and I think your social medias are getting into you see so much more of that on there, and the accessibility, and like, hey, we're going to be at this place. Well, I think even Al's had a...
Yeah, it was very fun. It was I was surprised how many people came, and then everybody's talking amongst themselves, and it was a social thing.
Right.
It's like they're people.
And who would have thought a garden center would invite people to bring plants and then trade with other people and walk away with plants and not purchase anything.
Right.
But the idea is that people come in and then see and get an idea about some of the other
We
plants.
had an ulterior motive.
Yes. Well,
so is this a trend, Judy?
This is a trend because we're going to do it again because
Right.
people had a good time. And it's like, it's that shop-attainment, where you have entertainment during the shopping.
Right.
You have a coffee bar or you have a, whatever kind of place that people can socialize or sit or bring their friends.
Right. Which is actually one of the trends of
Definitely, because you want to go shopping, but your time is limited. So why don't you meet a friend or your mom or dad and go shopping, but visit at the same time?
Yeah. So when you talk about trends, let's kind of dial back a little bit here. When we talk about trends are only as good as the buyers that buy into the trends. And that either means the retailers, which bring in lots of plants which they think are cool, or the consumer themselves. How much can a consumer drive the trend and start the trend? Like Pink Princess, was that was a consumer-driven trend. People found this plant and they loved it.
Oh my gosh, it blew up the internet, of course. Yeah.
And so people started posting pictures, and so the consumer drove that trend as opposed to the grower and retailer.
Right.
Is that going to be the way with social media that we're going to see in the future?
And if you're not looking at social media, you're not doing your job. because you have to kind of keep your ear to that or your eye to that and kind of see what's out there. Even though I couldn't buy it, when Pink Princess started on the internet, I couldn't buy it. I mean, I couldn't afford it. And so I had to tell people when they called, it's like, I'm so sorry, I'll put you on this list, but I don't know when I can get it. You're better off to go look on the internet. So I think as a buyer, you have to kind of look at that and kind of see where people's interests are and see how you can tag along to it, or maybe there's something similar.
Right. But if you being on the sales floor of the garden center and start hearing over and over people asking for certain things. So if you're not on social media, it's like, why is everybody all of a sudden starting to ask for a white whatever? And then pretty soon you start looking and it's like, wow, that's out there. I need to go find this.
I need to get it,
right?
sure.
Because you want to supply that need. Right. So I think, to your point, Jeff, it does go both ways, where you're going to have a lot of consumers, and I think that's going to be more of a trend of the consumer is going to start dictating some of these trends, just from what they're after and needs for plants, and then and then if you have breeders that are up on what's happening in going the other way, that can adjust and adapt and grow plants to fit certain needs that what the consumers are.
So more of a symbiotic relationship. It could drive one way, it could drive the other. And I know that with your previous company, and even now, growers are paying more attention to social media.
Absolutely.
And retailers are as well. And they're picking plants or trying to go in the direction, knowing that, I hate to say it, but the consumer is fickle. And what could be a trend, seen to be a trend in 1 month, can quickly disappear in another month. So.
And trends, there's a lot more of them out there now than there used to be.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Used to be, we look through these lists now, and it used to be, okay, you had maybe a handful of trends for the year.
Right.
And now it's like, okay, here's 50
times
trends.
10,
I mean, it's like,
more,
how do you keep up on it? They're not all going to stick, and you got to kind of pick and choose what's going to do.
So I'm going to throw out a couple of design trends that have come up, and you guys give me your thoughts on these different designs. And one was designing. It's a test.
It's a test.
And you're both going to pass with flying colors. Designing for climate change. And we've previous podcasts. You talked about pollinators before, and we talked about the heat and climate change before. How do you design and for climate change, since that is now in the news all the time, and zones are changing, it we're getting hotter, some places are experiencing stronger storms. How do you design for that with the trends that are happening now?
Yeah, well, I think with the climate changing, especially here in the Northwest, we are getting hotter summers, way hotter days and days of over 95 degrees. So I think that one of the trends, and it's almost like it's here now, is for drought tolerant, because the water issue, and so it's just the sustainability of it, and to being a good steward of the earth, and to be a gardener. So to plant things that are going to be drought tolerant once they're established. But then, I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. It's almost like you can plant something that maybe wasn't hardy here 10 years ago. So maybe you can plant something that you really saw on vacation in Florida, and I really want to have it now. Yeah. I want to have a plumeria tree outside. I mean, that's not right away, but I mean, something like that you really love from a vacation. And so, but yeah, I think that we have to start looking at that, and some plants are just not going to be around anymore here that you're going to be able to have successfally. So
and natives and nativars.
And natives been a popular trend for the last few years.
That you're seeing already more of taking the native species and cultivating them a little bit more, and you get a little better traits in them. Maybe they're not considered a true native in some people's eyes, but there are, if you have that traits for something that actually lives and supposed to live natively in your area, and being able to have that, is also gets into your, your drought tolerance and planting plants that are designed to work in your area where you're not trying to fight it.
Right.
So I'm going to group a couple of them here. They have one that's called Slow Life, which is essentially relaxation in your garden. You're watching the grasses grow. We talked about Zen gardens, which I think kind of falls in that same kind of category of, kind of reconnecting with the earth. So do you see that as a trend that's going to continue, or is this just the same thing that we've seen before?
I think it's almost like it's a reiteration of it. It's like reminding people you don't just work in your garden. You want to relax in it. I mean, I see people put benches in their gardens. It's like, make sure you go sit in it. You know,
Right.
you've worked hard in it. So I think it's our sanctuary, our haven, and we have to just keep reminding people that. So I think it is good that that's a trend every year, because it just kind of reminds us that you're not just doing this to kind of look from the inside. You need to go relax in
Right.
it or enjoy
Yeah,
it.
Enjoy it, right. You'll have water. You know, it's like, that trickling fountain.
That
Maybe
beautiful
maybe
noise.
it's a concrete statuary, or maybe it's something other bubbly that might be more, sticking with what's current as far as a trend or a style. But it's the overall. I think it's it's enjoying your space, right? And that's not going to go away. And we should always be reminded that we put in this work to do this, be in our garden, enjoy it.
Well, and I just read there's a local TV host, Mike Darcy, who's been a garden guru, and he gives out a newsletter. And in his newsletter this month, he says, I'm always talking about getting out and working in the garden. I'm going to talk today about just how I am enjoying my garden. And he goes out with his coffee in the morning and wanders his garden. And I think that's just a good thing. They can call it slow gardening, you can call it Zen gardening or whatever,
Right.
but it's all kind of the same features.
Yes.
And then we talked about one earlier that came up, Greek gardens as a trend. And we're trying to wrap our heads around this one because it was more featuring statuary, archways, stone walls, that kind of stuff. When you hear something like that, Greek garden as a trend, what does that mean? I mean, it's like the old English cottage garden.
Right. Right.
Is it a trend?
That's a new one. I haven't seen that one in a long time. Or maybe it's the old Mediterranean garden.
Yeah, I don't know.
Greece is on the Med.
Right.
That's a new one.
That's the need to go build a big concrete statue of something and big pillars and put plants
Right.
on top of them. But
It sounds very formal. Some people like that formality on it.
Right.
It's not just, a country garden or something like that, or a cutting garden,
Right.
or just flowers. It sounds like it's very, very formal with pathways and boxwood, and I think it'd be very elegant.
yeah,
You know?
and that's a style that's not going to be one fits all.
Right.
No.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
by
that's true.
by any means, but it might be coming back to it, give somebody just a Greek garden.
Yeah.
I could do that. That sounds pretty intriguing.
Right.
Gives them an idea.
So wrapping up, we've kind of reached our time today. The idea of trends is essentially that. It's kind of what's new and exciting, but it's only new and exciting if it really makes you excited about getting out in the garden. Any other thoughts on trends?
Yeah.
Other than slapping around the growers every time they change the name.
Well, like you said, I think if it gets people excited to be outside in their garden and to stay home and enjoy it with
Right.
friends or family, I think that's a good trend.
Yeah.
And what is your style? I mean, you have a house style, your decor, or even your person. So it's like
Right.
it's just an extension of that.
It is, and it's just getting people to think differently. It's getting retailers to look at things differently, display things differently, keeping it fresh and innovative, and getting more people involved and engaged to be outside and enjoy whatever space they're going to create for themselves.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for watching and listening today. We hope that your trend is that you keep on coming back to Garden Time and watching and listening to our podcast. We also want to thank Capital Subaru and Salem again for sponsoring us. And we welcome comments, questions. A lot of times you're sending specific questions, and that's great because we can answer those as well. But if you have any suggestions for topics of shows, we can do that as well. We look forward to seeing you again soon. We're getting ready to go on our trip to Belgium and Holland, and so we'll be posting pictures of that when we're there and possibly doing a podcast. So, be aware that's coming up in the future as well. But for now, we thank you for watching, listening, and happy gardening.
Start your new Subaru story at Capital Subaru. We are like nothing else. From the moment you step through these doors, you see it, you feel it. We do things differently here. Our people, our culture, our customer experience. Tell us what you're looking for, and we'll upgrade the way you shop for Subarus. When you're just browsing, need great service, or starting your next adventure, we're always here for you. It's your story at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.